Welcome to Mindful Awakening. This is part 3 of Mindfulness of the Mind. And if you missed part 1 and part 2, not to fear, you can absolutely still do this class. And you can go back and do part 1 and part 2 whenever you want to. They are available for you. So this 3-part working with the mind. Part of the reason I wanted to do this is because I found that I have a number of clients and students that don't know some of these basic fundamental practices that are part of how I work and part of where I come from in really any of my work with other people. Even if I'm not necessarily teaching them meditation, these are some foundational techniques that are just helpful for everyone to have. And focus on mind is one of those techniques. And so I really wanted to have an easy and accessible 3-part series that folks who maybe didn't have this skill set yet could start to cultivate it. And it's really been a pleasure diving in this way. And I think I'll continue to do so, do these kind of maybe 3-part practice series to really just support you in putting together your meditation toolkit. Focus on mind in particular is something that has just radically shifted the way that I experience myself, the way I experience the world, the way I experience you. That saying of "you are not your mind" that you may have heard many times from spiritual teachers or from motivational speakers, things like this. This is the technique that actually creates that insight. Now, there are other ways to come to that insight, of course. There's not just one way. There's not one technique that is the technique. And in fact, I suggest that if you run into someone that tells you that you consider getting a second opinion, because we are all unique creatures and we change and grow over the years. So what we need as far as a meditation technique or a spiritual practice may change with us. And it's not going to be a right fit for everyone. So this Focus on Mind series is not going to be a right fit for everybody who comes across it. But for the people that it's a right fit, awesome. With that said, this technique of working with the mind is really, really helpful for leading us to the insight of I am not my mind. This is because what we're learning to do is observe and witness the process of thinking, the arising and passing of mental talk and mental images. So at this moment, there's some banging somewhere. I don't know if it's my partner in the kitchen or if it's something happening downstairs. I can't tell. It's actually gone now, but it was happening as I was speaking. And what I could notice is that even though I was speaking and I was very present with what I was sharing with you, there was this little tiny strand of mental activity. It wasn't even necessarily fully formed as a thought, but just this little strand of like, what is that? Why is that happening right now? I'm making this video about this meditation technique. What's that banging, right? It's very subtle. I wouldn't even say it was that fully formed, but it was there. It was showing up. It was accompanied by sensation in the body, right? Like a sensation, a little bit of like a slight, really subtle bit of contraction kind of in the middle of the chest. And that you would call an emotional sensation. That'll probably be what we focus on next. What we're doing when we're working with Focus on the Mind, one of the things we're doing is we're separating out the thoughts from the physical emotional sensations so that our experience is not this tangled up mess of our thoughts and our emotions, which then leads us to feeling overwhelmed, or as one of my teachers, Shinzen, used to say a lot, having a freak out. Instead, we're able to see, okay, there's these separate strands of experience that are the self that's arising in response to the stimuli. And because I've practiced this a long time, it's sort of just running. It's just sort of running this awareness of that process of self. at first it was, it's a practice, and you start to like learn to deconstruct it, learn to see those pieces as separate. And then eventually you can just notice the wave of self that arises and passes, or the many waves of self that arise and pass. And so after a bunch of years of practicing this technique, it's just sort of there, the awareness of that. And the cool thing about this is that in a moment of, the banging, right? There's banging going on. It's just this like wispy thing that's arising and passing. It's not something that causes me to be like, oh man, this video is ruined. And what are they doing? Why are they being so loud? And blah, 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 blah. I'm putting me like in a space where I'm then reacting to that stimuli for the rest of the night, right? I don't know if it's coming from the kitchen, but let's say it is. Like if this was a solidified thing of like thought and emotion, then I'm going to go out there after this class and I'm going to say, what are you doing? Why are you being so loud? I'm teaching meditation, right? But it's just, that's not the experience. In fact, it becomes an opportunity. That's the cool thing, that as you learn to work with the self, mental talk, mental image, emotional sensation, everything that arises is an opportunity for practice. And it's an opportunity to deepen awakening. And so what we've been doing over these last 3 weeks is we've been separating out the mind part. And we've been just looking at the mind piece. And by doing that, some of you may be noticing, well, wait a second. If I'm witnessing, if I'm observing the arising and passing of this mental image and this mental talk, no matter how personal it might seem, I must not be that. There must be more to me than these thoughts that are occurring, than this activity that's occurring. And that's a beautiful first step, to be able to experience the witness. Now, in the language philosophy, the way that I teach, and there's, words are hard because different teachers use different words to mean different things, different traditions use different words to mean different things. But witness, in the way that I teach, is just a stop along the way. So it's not about, okay, I'm going to just from now on live in a state of witness. And there's a lot of reasons why that's just a stop along the way and actually wouldn't be ideal, that we'll get into another time. But it is a really important stop. And it's the beginning of the end of suffering, the end of optional suffering, let's say. Because not all suffering is optional. So this ability to witness the mind, it gives us freedom, it gives us space. It helps us not believe everything we think. Have you ever seen one of those bumper stickers, don't believe everything you think? Seriously. Some of the things I've thought. I mean, I could tell you some stories. I have told you some stories. I'll tell you more another time. But the point is that my mind took me to some dark places in my life. And learning to step back and to just witness that and to be like, oh, wait a second. I don't have to necessarily do what these words are saying. I don't necessarily have to believe what this narrative is expressing. I don't necessarily have to act on what's arising in my mind. Wow. That just changes everything. Changes everything. It changes everything. And so there's always going to be more to say about these techniques and these practices. And I will say more about this another time as we continue to explore the self, as we continue to explore freedom from optional suffering, as we continue to explore waking up, the never-ending story of waking up. Now I want to shift gears into talking a little about specifically what we're going to do today. So first, in our first session of this series, we were witnessing the mind, which is, what we're going to do, what we're doing in all three. But we were doing a specific version which is the foundational version, which is observing mental talk and mental image as two separate strands of experience. For most people, mental talk's happening back here. For most people, mental image is happening around here. It can be different for different people, so don't take that as the way it has to be. And we were just putting our attention on these areas of experience and observing, and maybe even labeling, saying talk for mental talk and image for mental image, as we noticed the arising and passing. And we got very curious about it, not the content, but about the activity of the mind. At no time with any of these techniques in this series are we trying to turn off our thoughts or shut off our mind or quiet our mind. We're not even necessarily observing the mind like clouds in the sky or leaves in the river. We are actually getting really, really curious about this activity that for most of us is completely running the show. We're getting curious about it. How loud is it? How soft is it? How bright is it? How dark is it? How does it bubble and arise? And how does it sort of drift and pass? And what are the actual dynamic qualities of this thing called mind? So we first just learned to observe, first one piece and then the other piece, and then bringing them together. Then last week, in the last session, we explored flow in the mind, which is movement and change. So not flow in the sense of like an athlete in flow, but flow just to acknowledge any movement and change in experience. And in this case, it was the movement and change of the mind. And there's very much a flow in our mental image and in our mental talk. And so we observed it in that particular way, which it's not necessarily different from the first thing we did. It's just a different twist on it. And for some people, one is more supportive than the other. And for some people, it's sort of like a experience of the thoughts feeling pretty solid at first, but then starting to notice, oh, actually, there's nothing solid about this, which again is an opportunity to start to notice. If this thought about how I need to, break up with my girlfriend is not solid, then maybe it's not necessarily true. Maybe it is, but hard to know when we're unconscious to what the mind is doing. And so when we become conscious, when we wake up to this activity, to this matrix that we're all living in, we start to have more choice. We can choose what thoughts we want to engage with and what thoughts just get to flow on through. So that's what we've done so far. And what we're going to do in today's class is move into something that my teacher Shinzen calls gone, or called gone. Not sure if he still does, because he's amazing. He's flow incarnate. He's like always improving and expanding and adding to or simplifying in ways that actually add to his technique. So I think he still uses the term flow. Either way, or gone rather. Either way, we'll use it today just because it's how I came up with using that label. So gone is a label to acknowledge that all or part of something has vanished, has gone. In Buddhist teaching, we would call this cessation. It's a vanishing, it's a dropping away of something. And this is happening constantly. And if you did the flow practice, you may have noticed it. may have started to notice the bubbling up and the falling away, the bubbling up and falling away. And that's what we're going to work with today. We're going to work with noticing the instant of vanishing, the gone. This is, well, I'll just tell a story from a student from many years ago. Someone who had never meditated before, and he was having a really tough time in his life. And he happened to walk into one of my classes, and I was teaching this technique, gone in mental talk and mental image. And afterwards, he said, I had no idea I could have freedom from my mind. It's been torturing me my whole life, and more so every day. And when I noticed the end of thought, there was all this freedom that opened up. I was able to recognize that it wasn't this solid, permanent thing. And I connected with a kind of calm, a kind of peace. You know, everything ends. And as human beings, we are often always fighting that, denying that. There's something called terror management theory I was just reading about. I think that's what it's called. And I recommend looking it up. It's a whole other kind of awakening. But this idea that this too shall pass, including like this body, is something that we're avoiding. And there's a lot of energy that we put into avoiding that in big and small ways. This practice can also help maybe lessen the amount of energy we're spending and potentially lessen some of that fear that we have about the endings. We might start to see that, oh, in this emptiness, where once there was and now there is not, there is a kind of nutrient that I so desperately need. And there is a doorway into not just the witness, right? That stop along the path, but much, much greater, vaster, more mysterious flow. So we are going to explore this practice together now. And we'll warm up just a little bit with observing mental talk and mental image, and then we'll move into gone. Now, you can use the label gone to acknowledge, or you can just acknowledge. And the thing is that once it's gone, you're just then back to observing what's there, right? It's gone, so it's gone. If you find yourself dropping into a very peaceful, equanimous, even empty experience, then let that unfold. That's an opportunity. If that doesn't happen, totally okay. Come back to witnessing mental talk and mental image and noticing when all or part of either of those strands of experience drop away. So with image, you know, maybe there's an image of a rooster that pops up, and then kind of the rooster's tail falls away, and then it starts to morph into a palm tree, and then the whole rooster falls away. So there's a bunch of gones in there. There's the gone of the tail. There's the gone of the space that the tail left when it turned into the palm tree. There's the gone of the rest of the rooster when it falls away. You also might not know exactly what the images are, and it's not about the content. So I'm using this as an example, but it's not about the content. So whatever mental phenomena is arising, it's also going to pass, and parts of it might pass, or all of it might pass. Eventually, all of it will pass. Same thing with mental talk. That one can be a little bit more cut and dry, because it's like, I'm talking. Gone. I'm telling you about this technique, and we're working on this tech. Gone, right? So you might have a similar, thing going on in your mind. It's easier at first to notice the gone in sound, but we're just going to dive right into the deep end and notice gone in mental talk as well. All right, so let's do it. Go ahead and settle into your posture, whatever that's going to be for you today. You might close your eyes. And you might tune back into relaxation. Just for a moment, just to anchor there. Also to utilize that resource of relaxation in the body, remembering that's always there if at any time, for any reason, the technique feels overwhelming for you. You can always just go to a place of resource in the body or something external. Okay, so now we'll shift our attention to the areas where mental talk and mental image arise for you. We'll just start to witness the arising and passing, the activity of the mind. You can do this by focusing on just one, focusing back and forth, moving back and forth between the two, free floating between the two, or perhaps you're wanting to work with flow and you can just notice potentially the arising and passing of mind, the combination of mental talk and mental image, or maybe flow, noticing one or the other. So you have lots of options. Remembering we're not trying to turn any thoughts off. We're not trying to quiet the mind. We're actually getting really curious and bringing lots of acceptance to this activity. If at any time the mind is quiet, which it will be, maybe for short periods, maybe for long periods, just hang with that quiet mind. Nothing you need to do there. And just be. And be available for potentially when some thought arises. Remembering the content does not matter. It doesn't matter if it's a negative thought. We're not here trying to set intentions or manifest anything. We're just noticing what the mind does when we just leave it alone and witness it. So it doesn't matter what the thoughts are. It doesn't matter if they're negative or positive, boring or super profound. It's all just thought. It's all just activity of the mind. So I'll be quiet for a few minutes while we just observe the activity of the mind. If you get pulled into the mental activity, start taking it personally, find yourself unconscious in it. Once you notice that's happening, without any judgment, and perhaps even with a flavor of celebration that you noticed, that you woke up, come back to observing, to witnessing the activity of the mind in whatever way you're choosing to do so. Okay. So now you are welcome to keep working this way. Of course, you're also welcome to say, you know what, I'm just going to focus on relaxation in my body. That's what feels best right now. Or you can come along to the next piece of this focus on the mind technique as we witness the cessation of thought, the vanishing, the ending of thoughts, the gone. Now, you can use the label gone if you'd like to acknowledge these moments of vanishing, these instants of vanishing. Remembering that we are interested in all or part of the thought vanishing. That's what we are hanging out, waiting for. And so it's very much the same technique. We're observing and witnessing this arising, but then we're getting really interested in the passing. We're getting really interested in that instant, that gone. So it might be supportive to start with just one, the mental talk or the mental image to begin, for anyone that this is brand new to. Or it might be more supportive to witness the gone of the wave of mind, the mental image and mental talk arising and then passing together. It might be most helpful to move back and forth between mental talk and mental image, noticing whatever gone is available. The thing is that if you're not there when the gone happens, you didn't experience the gone. So it might be good as a beginning to just choose one. Maybe choose mental talk, unless mental image just tends to be more available for you. And get real present, real curious. And notice the very instant that all or part of the thinking drops away into nothing. And if you like, you can be using that label gone just to acknowledge that instant of cessation, that instant of vanishing. That's optional. Use it if it is helpful. Anytime you get pulled off, you're going unconscious into the thinking. You're totally missing the gones. Once you notice that that's happened, acknowledge and come back to witnessing, to observing. If what the mind is saying is, gosh, you're so distracted, you're no good at this. First of all, you don't need to believe those thoughts. It's just the mind doing what the mind does. But you can also use those thoughts, those very thoughts about how you're doing the meditation wrong, to meditate. Notice the gone of that thought. For some of us, we deal with looping thoughts, perhaps as a way in which anxiety or depression can manifest. Looping thoughts also have gones, lots and lots of gones. And when you get curious about the gones, even in those looping thoughts that can be so challenging, they start to feel less oppressive. They start to feel less overwhelming. We start to tune into the end of the loop rather than what's being looped. Gone, gone, gone. The label's there as a support if it's supportive. You might start to notice rapid fire gones. Gone, 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 gone. I suggest that you don't label it as such. One label every 4 or 5 seconds will suffice. And you don't even need to use the label. You can notice all those gones without labeling them all. You may find at some point all those gones turn into one big gone. Everything dropping away. And again, if something along these lines occurs for you, no need to stick to the technique. That would be an opportunity. That would be something very worth sticking with. We're also not trying to make that happen. Everyone has their own unique journey on this path. Their own unique way of arriving to different stops along the path. Coming back again and again to this witnessing of the end of thought. The mind does not need to be quiet to notice the end of thought. Thoughts are constantly ending. Even if a new one is jumping right back in, thoughts are constantly ending. The syllables in mental talk might be a gone. The pixels in a mental image vanishing away could be a gone. So many levels of gone available. We'll do just one more moment of this practice. So maybe notice how deeply can you commit to just this practice for just this next moment or so. Okay, returning your attention for just a moment to your body, maybe taking a nice deep breath and a sigh. Maybe bringing a little wiggle into the shoulders, gentle movement of the neck and head. And as you're ready, go ahead and blink your eyes open if they're closed. Thank you so much for practicing with me.